Hey everybody, it's Josh Alexander from The Brokerage, the host of Orange County Housing Market News, your one-stop shop for all things Orange County real estate, where I interview local experts in the industry. I go over different data and where the housing market is going in Orange County, and then I'll also go over some different tricks and tips for both buyers and sellers. So especially if you're thinking about getting into the market in the next couple months, this is a great place to start. On today's episode, I'm going to be interviewing David Glanzrock, who is a vice president at Fidelity National Title, and we're going to be going over what title insurance is, what a preliminary title report is, and then also what buyers and sellers need to know about title insurance before and during escrow. So let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, so today I would like to welcome Mr. David Glanzrock to the show. David, welcome. Thanks for joining me today.
Josh, thanks for having me, man.
No problem. So if you want to just quickly kind of briefly explain who you are, what you do, and then we'll kind of get into all the questions I have for you today.
Terrific. Well, my name is David Glanzrock. I'm a vice president at Fidelity National Title. We are the largest title insurance company in the world. And where we are involved in the real estate transaction is obviously at the closing. And what we do is we actually ensure the clean and clear transfer of title from the seller to the buyer, from the buyer to the lender. And what's really interesting about title insurance, is that you actually have to have it to transfer. And we, like, my license is with the Department of Insurance, just like the State Farm guy or the Farmers Insurance. So we actually issue a real insurance policy. It's a single it's a single premium type of insurance policy, and it covers you from that date moving backward. It's probably the least expensive and one of the most important types of insurance that you will ever have. Josh, as you know, title is boring. So we'll try to make it as exciting as we can here today.
Okay, so basically we got the description of yourself and what you do. So title insurance is something that most people never talk about, but it comes up in a transaction. And it's still extremely important to know what it is and how it protects you. So can you go over, you kind of went over a little bit of the basics, but what does title insurance actually protect you from? And maybe give some examples of something that you've dealt with recently, that why title insurance is important for both the buyer and the seller, and what it actually does during a transaction.
Yeah. So that's a really great question, because most people see title insurance as a line item actually on their closing statement. It's a couple $1,000, and people are like, "What is this charge for? What is it for?" And so a lot of the work that we do to actually ensure clear title happens during the escrow process. And it's things that you don't see. And just like realtors, we don't get paid unless the transaction closes. And the way we get paid is with that title insurance premium. And so what that title insurance premium is actually going to do there's really three types of title insurance policies. Okay. Two, let's stick to the two when it comes to resale. We can talk about refis another time. So the owner's policy is typically paid for by the seller of real property, and that policy is based upon the sales price. Now, that's the policy. The owner's policy is actually what protects everyone. It protects the seller, it protects the buyer, and that's the policy that the buyer's really would use if they needed to. Now, there's a second policy, and it's called the concurrent lender's policy, and that's typically paid for by the buyer, and that's based upon the loan amount. If they have a loan, they need a concurrent lender's policy. The price of that is based upon the loan amount, and the lender's policy is actually a title insurance policy that the borrower, or the buyer in this case, is purchasing to benefit the lender. It actually protects the lender. And so, some very simple things, there's quite a few things that title insurance protects from, but some of the ones that I've had to deal with personally are, in the 60s, there was a person that owned, 10% interest on a property. The chain of title didn't show that. That person shows up 30 years later and says, well, wait a minute, I own part of this property. Title insurance is actually going to defend the owner in court and actually, pay out and make the property whole again. Some of the other things that we see the title insurance covers for is is easements. I've had a situation where there was an easement that was recorded on the wrong parcel. It was a utility easement, like an electric pole or something like that, and it didn't show up on the title report, although it existed. And the error wasn't really the title company's. The error was Edison's error. They didn't record it on the right parcel. But guess what? That buyer was protected from title insurance, and we actually, we paid out a premium. Now, the thing that we actually pay out the most for, Fidelity, excuse me, like I'm going to get the number probably wrong, but we paid out like $330 million in claims last year.
Wow.
Hopefully no one ever has to go through the process, but we do, like hopefully you never have to use your car insurance or your health insurance or your standard homeowner's insurance. It's the same thing. Hopefully you never have to use title insurance. But the number one thing that title companies pay out for is actually what are called code violations. And code violations are through the city. Maybe there was a structure that was built too close to the road with a setback. Maybe there was a fence that was built too high. And the reason why this is the number one thing that title companies pay out and defend in court for the new buyers is because we really don't do inspections of property unless it's over a certain dollar amount. So how are we to know that the fence is too high? Okay.
Yeah.
I know we're going to talk about prelims in a minute. But some of the things that can happen is if code violations are recorded on the chain of title, and if there's a code violation, we have to clear that up before we close. So a couple real life examples, I'll give you two. Josh, you can decide whether or not you want to clip this out or not. But the first is a mechanics lien, and maybe that's a different conversation. But real quick definition: a mechanics lien is something that a contractor can put on your house, okay, for unpaid construction. And what's really interesting about mechanics liens is it dates back to the date that the work started, not the date that it's recorded. It's pretty unique from a title perspective. And so we had a situation where there was a seller in Newport Beach. They had a bunch of work done on this property. They sold the property. A mechanics lien was recorded like a week later because they did all this work and they didn't pay their contractor. Now, of course, the typical thing is everybody's up in arms and everybody freaks out. And we're like, okay, let's take a deep breath. This is protected. You're protected by title insurance. Okay. Yep. And so, basically Fidelity, we were able to resolve the issue within like 96 hours. We filed a claim. Obviously, we're the largest title insurance company in the world. We're the highest rated title company on the Fortune 500 list. Like, you're not going to mess with us. Like, we're scarier than any attorney that you could probably call yourself. Plus, you don't have to pay for it. So basically, we knew where the seller of the property was because we distributed funds to them. And we basically said, like, look, you're going to pay this mechanics lien or we are going to come down on you with the wrath of God. And sure enough, there was a check in our office the next morning.
I'm sure this will be, I was going to say, I'm sure this, especially with all the construction that's been happening during COVID, there'll probably be a lot more of these coming up soon when people start selling their properties and aren't paying their contractors.
Yeah. Pay your bills. We're going to get your money.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to get it,
Yep.
The other thing is, my best friend, he bought a property in downtown Phoenix, and we, obviously, we're in all 50 states. So he used us for the purchase of his property. And as it turns out, he has this concrete fence, like a block fence that's 1 foot tall, but he lives in this urban area. And basically somebody reported this code violation to the city of Phoenix. And the city said, you either have to apply for a variance or you have to cut the fence down, get it to the right level. Well, of course he doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want what's going on out there to come into his home, right?
Yeah.
Well, all we had to do is, I showed him how to do it, filed the claim. Remember I said code violations. So basically Fidelity said, we'll help you with the variance, or we'll pay to have the fence fixed. So it's simple things like that hopefully you never have to deal with, just like other types of insurance policies, but it is there.
Yeah. And that's not something and most buyers are going to inspect when they go through a property and say, hey, how far is this lot line? They're not going to hire a civil engineer to go out there and basically survey the surroundings saying, is my fence in the right spot? and all these type of things, you're not going to find that. Yes, you have a general inspection and they're going to give you some basic information about the property, but in terms of code violations, they're never going to catch all of them, especially if it's an outdoor situation, because most home inspectors, they look outdoors at some things, but they're focusing on the actual house itself. They're not looking at lot lines and that type of stuff. So
Yeah.
that's good to know that that kind of stuff is protected, but it's something that you don't usually do a lot of investigation unless you have
Well,
some hint that maybe your property lines were way out of whack based on some of the information you had previously.
well, in the home inspectors don't know the municipal code, but I think
Yeah.
what's more kind of concerning is the end user really doesn't know what that title insurance policy covers. I
Yep.
mean, my best friend, like, it wasn't until he actually shared with me what was going on that I told him, like, dude, like, why are you paying for your own attorney? Like, we're going to cover that. Like, here's who
Yeah.
you call, here's what you do. And had we not had the conversation, he would probably be fighting this and paying for it out of pocket on his own.
Got it. And so once you get that title insurance, does that expire or how long does that last?
The title insurance policy is good up until the next transfer or the next refinance. So it's putting a date stamp with the date and time of when the property closes. So it's the end of September 2021. If we have a property that closes today, it's Thursday, September 30th. That title insurance policy is going to cover everything from Thursday, September 30th and prior up until the previous title insurance policy was issued. That's how the policy covers.
Okay, good to know. So now let's go on. I want to talk about the title and the prelim, which is something that most buyers and sellers are going to see pretty early on in a transaction. So it's one of the most, it's a giant thing of paperwork, probably 20, 30 pages long typically is what you see those come in at, I'm guessing. That's what I've usually
Yeah,
seen.
yeah, they can be quite lengthy.
So it's something that a lot of times just gets sent to the buyer, not a lot of explanation, and they have no idea what it is, if it's important, do they need to pay attention to it. So I just kind of want to go over some of the basics of the title prelim, what it is, and for both buyers and sellers, kind of what they actually need to be aware of and what you need to pay attention to when you're looking this over, and kind of how important it is to make sure that you're kind of going through this document. So can you just briefly go over what that title prelim is, and then kind of go over maybe some of the different options or the different things that buyers and sellers should be paying attention to when you're checking that out?
No, I think that's a great question. The prelim is the actual preliminary title report. I'm going to call it a prelim. That's what we refer to it as in the industry. The prelim is the document that shows the chain of title. It's going to show the owner. It's going to show all kinds of things, which I'll talk about in a second. The first thing to really note about a preliminary title report is it's right there in the word. It's a prelim. It's preliminary. It's not complete. Okay. And we're going to talk about why it's not complete here in a second. The first and the most important thing that we see on there, and I think it's listed in order. The first thing we see is the vested owner. Basically, who owns the property? Okay.
Yep.
It's and that is very important. The vested owner tells us who has the authority to sell the property. It's really that simple.
Yep.
Somebody might think that they have the authority to sell the property, and maybe they do, but maybe they need somebody else to sign as well. We're going to be the ones to say that, not Realist, not the MLS, not anything else. That comes from a title company. Who has the authority to sell this property? Do you want me to tell a quick story?
Absolutely. I love your stories, David.
Okay. I had a deal. There was a property that was in a trust. Okay. If you own real property, trusts are really a home run because they help you avoid probate. You don't have to go to court, passes to the heirs. We can talk about that on our next call. But when a property is held in a trust and the trustees have both passed away, we have to review the full copy of the family trust. We have to review it. We're the ones that are going to make the determination based upon the trust, who has the authority to sell. And basically the situation was, I've known the family for 20 years. This person has the right to sell. I trust them. I'm like, okay, I'm telling you, I need to see the trust. Trust, but no pun intended, but trust, but verify, right? They had photos taken. They had this house staged. They did all kinds of stuff. A couple weeks later, we got a copy of the trust. Okay. The situation was the person they were talking to was the beneficiary of the trust, not the successor trustee. Okay. So although the beneficiary benefits, gets the money for it, they have no authority to sign. Okay. So that's where the vesting comes in. And that's where we come in.
Got it. Okay, so in terms of let's start with maybe the seller side. So on the selling side, what do sellers need to be paying attention to on these preliminary reports that they could run into trouble if you find something on there?
Okay, that's a great question. So the first thing you're going to see obviously is the vesting. Do you have the authority to sell? The second thing we're going to list is going to be the property taxes. Are they current? Are they delinquent? Do you have any outstanding property taxes from previous years? Okay, those have to be taken care of. All
Yeah.
right. The next thing on the body of the prelim is it's going to show easements. Okay, is the property in an HOA? Does Southern California Edison have the right to come to the back 10 feet of your property? Is there a drainage ditch? All kinds of things like that are things that are going to show up on the prelim. The next section is where we're going to show liens and judgments, and that's really something that sellers need to be aware of. Okay, so things
Okay.
like child support liens, spousal support, federal tax liens, state tax liens. I could go on and on about what shows up there. Now, what's really important to know about that next section where the liens and the judgments are going to show up is there's two systems really at play. There's one system about what's recorded on the property, and there's another system about what's recorded on the person. Okay.
Okay. Yep.
So that next section is part of what's called the general index. Okay. The general index is what they record on your name. All right.
Okay.
So let's say this. So, like, Josh, I love you, buddy. There's probably more Josh Alexanders in the United States than there are David Glanzrocks, although you're one of a kind.
Yeah, of
Okay.
course.
If you're going to sell your house with your name, the likelihood is that there's going to be some GI hits. Okay.
Yep.
So maybe the situation is there's a GI hit for a child support judgment. And you're like, wait a minute, I don't have any kids. I know you have kids. I don't have any kids. How do I have a child support judgment? Nobody needs to freak out. Everybody needs to take a breath. It's part of the process. Don't call your attorney. Don't get upset. There's a form that every seller, everyone has to fill out. Every seller, every buyer, every borrower has to fill out a document called the Statement of Information. The Statement of Information is actually how we as a title company verify that that child support judgment belongs to our person. Okay.
Okay.
Because initially, remember, preliminary, all we see is the name. The
Yep.
Statement of Information allows us to verify if that belongs to us. We get it back. We don't need an original. It doesn't need to be notarized. You send it back to us. It takes 24 hours to clear it. Those liens can drop off like that. It's no problem. Nothing else done. Now, the one thing to know about the Statement of Information, Josh, is in some cases, and maybe 10%, liens can get added with the Statement of Information. Judgments can get added with the Statement of Information. So for everyone involved, it is so essential and important to get that Statement of Information back to us as quickly as possible. Because remember, preliminary, until we have the SI, we don't know.
Got it. Yeah, and
Okay.
I was about to bring that up with the statement of information. Typically, you want to have this. Most sellers are going to fill it out as part of their opening escrow packet. But if you can fill it out ahead of time before you even get into escrow, if you are a seller, that's just going to make sure you're not going to have one extra issue in escrow. If there is an issue, more time for the title company to clear it up. So if you are thinking of selling your house, make sure you get that statement of information filled out and back to either your agent so they can get it to the title company or directly to the title company themselves so they can start looking into it, get the preliminary title report pulled up, and really start getting their job started as soon as they can, even before you get into escrow, because again, it's really there to basically keep you from having issues during escrow and make sure everything gets sorted out beforehand so you're not finding about this halfway through escrow and then having to take care of a bunch of issues. Because I'm guessing there are some issues that take a while to resolve when you get into escrow and find something on the title report.
Yeah. So
correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me speak to that real quick. If
Yep.
something is added to the title report because of the Statement of Information, it's going to be something on a federal or state or judicial level that will require 15 days. And there have been situations where we get the Statement of Information back the day we're supposed to close, and a judgment shows up And there's really nothing we can do other than wait. It will delay the closing. There's anything that pops up because of the statement of information will delay the closing period. At least 10 business days. There's no way around it.
Got it.
Get the statement of information in as quick as possible.
Yep. So for sellers, make sure, one, you don't freak out when you see this title report, because a lot of it's going to get taken care of once you get all the information to title that they need to verify you are who you say you are, as well as that you own the property. So that's kind of the general takeaway that I get from here, is make sure the information is filled out quickly at the beginning of escrow. Most stuff on there is going to get cleared up once you get that statement of information, especially if you have a very common name like John Smith or Josh Alexander, where you're going to have a lot of people that have that same name that you might pop up on their information as well. So
correct.
Now,
there's a third section of the prelim that we look at as well. Really 3 to 4 more, 1 or 2 more. The next is going to actually show open deeds of trust. Now, deeds of trust are the instrument that secures a loan, a home loan, a home equity line of credit, something like that. That's called a deed of trust. That's going to be the next thing that we show. For sellers, it's really important if you have a loan that's been reconveyed or paid off, even though it's been paid off, that happens with an uninsured deed. So we're going to have to get some additional information to verify that that home is paid off free and clear. And then the last section is requirements, any additional documentation that we're going to need on top of everything else.
Okay, got it.
And that's the prelim.
That's the prelim. It's simple as that. So I want to go back to, so when you were saying that if a seller has paid off their home, I know that you've told me about this before, but what are they getting in the mail or sent to them that's going to help them really clear this up faster? So again, they don't have issues during escrow.
They are going to get a final statement from the bank, or they're going to, or what's called a paid in full letter.
Okay. And that's what have to hold on to that.
Please hold on to that.
Put it in your safe. Yeah.
Put it in your safe. I mean, because again, we don't need to get into the whole uninsured deed thing, but we have to verify the information, because there's nothing stopping anyone from recording anything on the chain of title. Trust and verify. The way we verify that a loan's been paid off, paid in full letter, zero balance statement. Worst case scenario, and unfortunately most of the time this is what happens, escrow actually has to order a demand or a zero balance letter directly from the bank, because people aren't holding on to this really important documentation.
Got it. So good to know. Okay, perfect. So in terms of buyers, usually within the first couple of days of opening escrow, like I said, all of a sudden they get sent this email from the escrow company saying, here's your preliminary title report. And it's a 20 or 30-page document. It freaks them out. So is there stuff on here that they need to be looking for, or is this something more just for sellers?
Well, that's a good question. So anytime you're in a buyer situation, regardless of whether or not Fidelity's doing the title, I'll review the prelim and tell you what you need to look out for. Okay. I know you do that with me. Yeah. I have quite a few clients that do that, that's one way to do it. But I really think, one of the biggest things that you need to be aware of as a buyer is the easements and anything that's recorded that restricts your ability to utilize the property. So CC&Rs, if you're in an HOA or a planned community, utility easements, things like that. That's the stuff that buyers really need to be aware of. As far as any of those other things we talked about with the sellers, that has to be cleared up before it's closed.
Got it.
And if there's something that's not showing up, guess what? You got title insurance. We're gonna take care of you.
Okay. So on the buyer side, it sounds like most of the stuff on there obviously has to be cleared up anyway before they can sell the home. You're going to be taking care of it in the background while you go through escrow, getting the stuff cleared up for the seller. In terms of easements, in case anybody out there doesn't know what those are, that's basically, especially in Orange County, probably the biggest type I'm guessing that I see is usually utility easements.
I think that's the biggest type. That's the biggest type anywhere.
Like if you have a telephone pole in your backyard, you're basically giving the right to Edison, whoever is your electrical provider in there, to go to the backyard, take and service whatever they need to back there. So it's good to know who's allowed on your property and what section of your property. So it's good to have that information handy, so you don't all of a sudden get a notice in the mail or someone comes to your door saying, hey, we need to get back there. and then it becomes an issue. So that is definitely something you want to look out for and know ahead of time, just so you understand everything about the property you're trying to buy before you purchase it.
Well, and even beyond that, like let's say you have a home, a buyer that wants to build a pool. Maybe they want to build an ADU. Maybe they're going to tear down the property and build a duplex because of SB9 that just passed.
Yep.
There's a lot of things that the state of California has done to make it easier to do things like that. But you can't build on an easement.
Yeah.
If you find this beautiful property that you want to build this amazing backyard and you want to take it all the way to the property line, but there's a 10-foot easement for drainage, that would be something that you probably want to know before you buy the property.
Perfect. Yep, exactly. And that's definitely the biggest thing as a buyer. You want to make sure, again, you just want to make sure that you know as much about your property before you purchase it and that you're comfortable with whatever easements are there. And like David, like you said, especially with SB9 passing and now that it's going to be a lot easier to start building these ADUs or more than one ADU on a single property. You want to know where you can build those, where you can't build those. So you're not buying a property with the intent to do that, and all of a sudden you close and realize that you can't. So it's definitely important to make sure that the buyers are still looking at that stuff. And if you have questions about it, that's why you have a title representative to talk to about, and they'll be able to clear that up, because a lot of the stuff on there might look scary, but usually 99% of the stuff gets cleared up very easily, and you're not going to have major issues with the stuff that's on the title report. And again, David and his team are doing it in the background, so it's not something that you actively have to manage in most circumstances.
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Anything else that you would think people should know about the prelim when they do get that during escrow, or even before or after escrow?
We don't want to hold up transactions, like that's not the goal.
Yeah.
We need the information that we need. And the truth of the matter is that we want to make it minimalist, but we need what we need. And it's truthfully not up to anyone else other than us, what we need.
Yep.
And so, with cooperation with the realtor partners that we have and with the sellers that we work with, we can make for a really smooth transaction. My broker taught me if title's doing their job right, you don't know they've done anything at all. And that's really what the goal is to make the transactions boring. Like we don't want surprises,
Yep.
but we definitely need cooperation.
Yeah. And most of the time it is boring. Like I said, most of the time you hear about title, but you don't, even during a transaction, you don't really hear anything about, besides you get that preliminary report. That's it. And then nothing else is ever said and done. So that's kind of the ideal transaction where they're working in the background, nothing's happening, no red flags are issued, and that's going to happen most of the time. But when it doesn't, that's what that title company is there for, to protect you. So thank you for the information today, David. It's been a lot of great information out there. If anybody has title questions, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Stand on the right side. It's right there.
Right there. So anybody listening to the podcast, what's you prefer? Phone,
yeah. So
email?
Anything. Call, text me 714-917-9874. You can email me at titleisboring@FNF, like Frank Nancy Frank.com. Pretty easy to find. David Glanzrock. I'm here to help your questions. Regardless, I'll try to point you in the right direction.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you again so much for your time. I'll also link that info up in the show notes so people can check it out there. And we will see you in the next show.